Hi everybody, it's Anne with Art on the Creek. Thanks for joining me today in my home studio in Parker, Colorado. Today we are here for beginner watercolor lessons and I'm so happy you've tuned in to join us. We're redoing our wall back here with new lessons, and today we're going to do the third one, which is already up there. We're going to paint a box of donuts. Are you ready? Let's go do it. Alrighty, who's ready for some donuts? I love painting food. I've got this 2-welled water container and I have been painting earlier today. So we're going to try and use that clean well. I've got my 5x7 block of Paul Rubens cold press and I think I want to tape the edge. Let me just get that set up here and then we will resume. I'm trying to use up all my washi tape. I think I've gone through my wider ones, but now I'm onto the narrow ones, so it'll still make a nice border for us. That's totally optional. You don't have to do that. But here we go. Now we're all taped off. Now what I would like to do for today's drawing is, here's our reference photo, by the way. Let me put this up. Here's the reference photo that we're going to be using. Now today I am going to go ahead and use a ruler. We're going to use the rule of thirds in this layout here to get the edges of the boxes right. So on the bottom edge, I'm in about 1/3, and on that right edge, I'm down about 2/3, and that's where I'm meeting those points. And then that's the top edge of the box. Now here's the bottom edge of the box, and I'll go in and change that line after I get the others drawn because I think I had a little too much slant on it. So trying to go directly across there to the lower third point, and that will be the top edge of the box. And then now we can go ahead and create the back edge, the fold of the box. And we don't want this completely parallel to that top edge of the box line that we drew first because it's going to go back and this will help us, it goes back in space. And this will help us get our perspective just right. If we make them parallel, it might look a little bit weird. I do want the sidelines parallel though, so those edges are going to be as parallel as you can get them. None of this has to be perfect, just in general. And then when I got that line drawn, I realized that this sideline over here was just that back edge that I'm working on right there was just a little bit too short. So I am going to readjust the angle of the bottom edge of the box here. And for that reason, I'm trying to keep these lines pretty faint at this point because if I get it wrong, I want to be able to erase it, but I don't want to damage the paper, so you don't want to erase too much. In fact, you might want to practice this drawing on a sheet of copy paper, just regular printer paper, and then transfer it over onto your watercolor paper if you're having a little bit of trouble getting the lines the way you want them. This is the flap of the box that tucks down inside when it's closed. Now our donuts, the way that they are set up, now I'm going to draw a line here on the fold. So that's the crease of the box right there. The donuts, though, the way they're set up, look like the box won't be able to close, which makes it even more appealing because that makes those donuts large and fluffy. When you're drawing the donuts, all you want to do is try and draw a circle somewhat. It's a little bit to the side. So kind of think of like a croquet hoop or an entrance of a tunnel. It does have an arc to it, but it's not completely round. You could go ahead and trace something round and then change the shape just a little. And you'll see here, I kind of got off on this last one. I ended up making not enough space for my final donut. Now in our box, there are 6 donuts, but I only wanted to paint 5. So that'll give us more room to make the donuts a little bit more appealing because we can see more of the donuts. And we're also working on a pretty small piece of paper here, so we kind of have to cut things down. This is only 5 inches by 7 inches, so we can assume that we've already eaten one of these donuts. But anyway, here you go. Here's how we're going to fit that in. And now I am just drawing or rather erasing the lines that occur inside the donuts. Now, I'm leaving my pencil lines for you guys so that you can see where things are when I've painted them, and I'm kind of going over the lines that I want to keep just a little bit more darkly. Not super dark, but just a little, just enough so that we can see it. Now, if you wanted to paint this and not have any lines showing, this would be a great time to take your kneaded eraser, which is what I'm using here, and to roll it in your hands until you have a little kind of a tube shape, and then roll it over your paper, and that will help to make those lines very, very faint. On this first donut, we need to establish that it has a thickness. So if you look at the picture, you see that that center hole is not round, it's kind of oval in shape. And then there's that other little inside part there that marks the bottom of the donut. So, and that will all be in shadow too. Now we're going to draw these frosting lines in. I'm just kind of making this up. I'm glancing over at the references, and I'm just kind of moving my hand along that edge of the donut so that the pencil can create a very gentle wavy line of frosting. I don't want them to be too uniform. I'm not making them all the same. Some of the frosting might have a bigger dip than others, and I'm just trying to make it so that varying amounts of the bread part of the donut show through. So there we go. We've got all of our painting drawn, and we are just about ready to begin. I'm going to start with my stroke brush. That is the 3/4 inch flat. And what I want to do, first of all, is clean the space on the palette here. I want to create, if you look at this white box, we can see that there are some shadows there and that they're kind of a cool temperature. So I'm going to start with purple. This is the dioxazine violet. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix a little bit of an orangey tone to it to kind of warm it up just a little bit. I'm going to go in with that cadmium red and just mix a touch in there to kind of pull it more toward the brown. And then, because I don't want it to be brown, I am going to mix in a little bit of ultramarine blue and just try and get this shadow just the right temperature that I want. So play with your mixes a little bit. I like starting my shadows with either ultramarine blue or dioxazine violet and then going from there. So it's going to look a little bit shocking when you first put it on. Don't worry about that. Just concentrate the pigment up towards the left, and you're also going to make it very loose, very watery. I'm just using big gestural strokes here, and then I'm coming in with a paper towel and blotting that off. Paper towels can be your best friend. They can really add some fun texture in your drawing, and here in your painting rather. And here in this case, for the shadow, that's really going to make that nice. Now, on the flap there, if you didn't want to have that line showing where the flap creases, go ahead and erase it. But then what you'll do is you'll manipulate your shadows so that you have a very fine white space in between the shadows there, and that will demarcate where that fold is on the flap. And here's where I'm mixing in a little bit more of that ultramarine to deepen the shadow. Inside the box is very dark down there where the donuts are nestled in. And I wanted to add a little bit of that ultramarine around the edge to kind of create harmony in the shadows. So I'm pulling that down, just thinning it out, and really just having fun playing with this wash, getting these shadows just right. The only shadows I'm worried about are the face of the box, the front of the box, the underside of the lid, and then this little part right here, this inside corner where we can kind of see a little bit more gray. And you can see I'm just warming that up with varying little tests of pigment. I think I might have gone in ultimately with some burnt sienna and ultramarine mix and really just make that full-on gray, because I don't remember if I got it dark enough on this first pass or not. But that is step one, to create the shadows on the box. If you feel like your shadows are too dark or not dark enough, don't worry about it. Once you get the donuts in there, then you'll be able to judge that for sure. So here we are now. We're going to use this yellow ochre, and we're going to paint the golden deliciousness of the dough of the donut part. Be careful when you get near the edge. You'll see the rim of the box. I kind of got a little crazy there and went over the edge a couple of times. But that's okay, because this lifts off very easily. This is very forgiving paper. So if you do make a mistake like that, you're just going to want to get your brush wet, blot it off, and gently scrub the area where you don't want the paint to be, and then come in with a paper towel and just blot that right off. I'm just adding different levels of brown. I think I finally settled on the burnt umber to mix in with this yellow ochre to create that more done looking part of a donut. You know, the donuts have that darker brown where they've touched the oil, and there's a lighter stripe in the center. So we can continue to play with that with using the burnt umber and the yellow ochre. So let's go ahead and get all of our donuts all painted in on the bread part, and then we can work on the frosting. Now I'll speed this portion up here because we're kind of doing the same thing on each donut. First you'll go in with a layer of either the burnt umber or the yellow ochre, and then kind of blot off what you don't want and come back in and fill in so that you're working wet on wet. So for instance, on this donut right here, I'm going in with the yellow ochre first on these last two donuts. And while that is still damp, I will go in on the edges, both where the frosting is touching and where the back of the donut is touching the next donut in line. I will put a very little bit of burnt umber, and that way that pigment, those two pigments can play together on the edge of the donut and just kind of naturally merge and get together. This red that's on my palette is kind of a mix, but mostly you're going to want a cool red. It's kind of a mix between the Perylene Scarlet and the Anthraquinone Red. If you're using this set, just the two cool reds there. And you're going to water it down pretty thinly, and then go ahead and just paint on your pink frosting. Now for this case, if you look at the reference photo again, you'll notice that the light is of course very soft, but the donuts are a bit lighter on the top than they are on the bottom. There is a bit of a shadow. So if we concentrate that pigment toward the bottom, and of course in the hole it's going to be a little bit darker too. But if we put that pigment a little bit thicker down here along the bottom, and you can see I'm going in wet on wet and just gently coaxing that pigment to where I want it to travel to, then we'll have a nice fluid gradient of tone, and the donuts will look a little bit more natural. So let's see, which color should we make this next one? How about chocolate? I like chocolate, and I think this burnt umber is probably going to make a pretty good chocolate. I am going to add a little bit of the burnt sienna though. You could also add a little bit of purple to it. Chocolate is not just a flat brown. It does have a little bit of reddish to it, and I just think chocolate looks better if you put a little bit of color in with that brown. So this is going to be the first wash, and it's kind of leaning more toward the burnt sienna, than the burnt umber. And once again, we're concentrating the pigment at the bottom and then pulling it up. And then I'll go in this area up here where I've still got some white space, and I'm going to get my brush wet, tap it off, and then just use the water that's remaining in my brush to bring those two pieces together. Now, the donut that I really want to talk to you about though is the white donut. White on white is something that's kind of a challenge to paint, but what we need to think about is the shadows. Now, if you look at the reference photo, you can't really see a whole lot of shadows on that white frosting, but we're going to make some. So we're going to use the same shadow paint that we used for the box lid, and we're just going to kind of go in there with a little bit heavier than we want. And then I'll go in with a wet brush, and now I'm coming in with that paper towel and just blotting off. This makes so much texture and so much natural gradients in shadow and color that it really does help you to get a natural look on your painting. So you see I've gone in there and painted, and now I'm just going to get that paper towel a little bit damp and just blot some of it off. So it just leaves me with some natural looking hills and valleys on that white donut there. And now we can go in and do the next one. And rather than making another chocolate with all those peanuts on it, which I would eat and I love, I think I'm going to go for a butterscotch or a maple. So I'm mixing some of that yellow ochre with some of the browns that are on my palette. And same thing, I'm just going to pull that pigment down right along the edge of the donut where it would be the darkest, and then carefully along the edge of the box, and then work that up. Now I'm going to blend it together with a wet brush that I have blotted off on my paper towel. You don't want to add too much water in this case because you will get a cauliflower bloom, and the frosting on our donuts really does need to be pretty smooth in order to be kind of convincing. Now you could play with this and you could put all kinds of textures on there. You could do salt, you could do cauliflower blooms. You could really have fun with this if you wanted to, but for the way that I am painting this here, the way that I'm showing you today, we're going to try and avoid those cauliflower blooms. And then this part here, I was mixing some purple because I thought I was going to go with blueberry, and then I decided, no, I'm not sure if a blueberry donut would look appetizing. So let's make it lemon instead. I do like blueberry donuts, but I wasn't sure how it would look They end up looking kind of gray sometimes. So, and I didn't want a bright blue donut. I don't know. I couldn't think of how to make it work well. So we're just going to go with lemon. And I hope you guys like lemon because I would eat that one too. In fact, lemon and blueberry is a really good combination. So if you wanted to paint little blueberries on here, you sure could. Well, this yellow that I used to do this one is a Hansa Yellow Light. And if you have a lemon yellow, of course, that would work just fine. Same thing that we did with all of the other donuts. We just are going to put in the pigment right at the bottom and then pull it up with a wet brush. And now I'm going in with some yellow ochre on that butterscotch donut and a little bit of the burnt umber on the chocolate donut. And I am painting in just shadows where the center hole of the donut will be. And on our front donut here, our little star of the show, I'm going in with some of that burnt umber and I'm going to mix in some ultramarine blue. First I did the burnt umber with just alone so that I could create the crust that you could see through the bread portion. And now I'm going in with the gray just to create a deep shadow. So you should have on the left side of that little opening a touch of burnt umber, and then on the right side of it a little bit of a shadow. And I'm going to go ahead and punch up those two shadows on the maple and the chocolate donut with that same gray mix of burnt umber and ultramarine. Now let's give this a dry. I like to use a heat tool to dry my paintings. That way I don't have to wait. But if you don't have one of these, you can either use a blow dryer. You just want to be sure and have it so that it's not blowing too strong or too hot. And of course, your other option is just to leave your painting for a while and let it to dry naturally. I'm too impatient though. I like to let it dry. So now that we're ready to go in and add the sprinkles, I'm just kind of taking my number 4 brush. I've dipped it in some of the green that happened to be on my palette. If you are looking to do this, it is a phthalo green that I'm using. And I've got the paint kind of about the texture of whole milk to yogurt. It's pretty, it's not very liquidy, not very runny. And now I'm just going to paint some sprinkles on the lemon donut and on the pink donut. And then we'll go in with some more colors. I think we should use some purple. We'll use some of that dioxazine purple. We'll use some of the red and a little bit of that cadmium red because that's going to give us a look that's kind of like an orange. I think the only color that you wouldn't have trouble or that you wouldn't have success rather using would be a yellow. So let's see. Oh, and I think we can put a blue in there too. I'm going to add a phthalo blue. Any of the phthalos will work for you because they're staining colors. So let's zoom ahead to where those sprinkles are all applied. What you want to remember is just to make sure that they're all going in different directions and that they're all about the same length. I've got this part sped up, of course, but you can just see the sprinkles add nice little decorations to our donuts. And now we're ready to put the sprinkles on the white donut. And this one we are going to use the chocolate sprinkles or jimmies, whatever you call them in your part of the world. What do you call these things? I've always called them sprinkles, but these are the long skinny ones, and I guess in the Northeast they're called jimmies. I'd never used that term growing up, but I kind of like it because it differentiates from the little round sprinkles, the nonpareils. At any rate, I like these little chocolate sprinkles on a white donut. They look very delicious, so I'm going to be sure and add those in. And once again, keep them about the same length, but always going in different directions. You don't want anything to look too uniform. And now let's get into that burnt umber again, and we're just going to darken up this chocolate. You'll notice that when you dry your watercolor, once you're all done and you get other things on here, for instance, here it was the sprinkles, the other donuts might pale in comparison. That's true with anything with your art. The other parts of your painting might look a little bit pale, and that's because watercolor has a color shift, and when you finish something and get all the detail in, then you can really notice it's really pretty prominent how some other area of your painting might be lacking. So I'm just kind of dropping in a little bit more of that burnt umber just to make this chocolate really a little more rich and deep. And I'm still using the wet on wet technique to spread it around. I just wetted that area up there, and now I'm pulling that pigment around so that it can merge and blend really in a soft, natural way. And I'm going to do the same thing with that maple donut back here. I'm just really focusing mostly on that yellow ochre, and I've mixed in just a touch of the burnt sienna, or excuse me, the burnt umber. And I'm just focusing the pigment on the bottom and a little bit on the top, and then I'll get my brush wet and pull those together right here. That's how that's done. You just dip your brush in the water, tap it off, and then just use it to kind of coax and mix that pigment around. And now we're going to dry this one more time. And now that it's dry, it's a good time to just give your painting a real critical eye and find out where else you might need something that needs a little bit of attention. I'm going to put a little bit more pink in here. Now I'm not going to paint over the jimmies or the sprinkles. I'm just going to go in and kind of try and touch up this front donut a little bit so that it looks a little bit more prominent. And I'm just doing that by adding another glaze of the yellow ochre and the burnt umber around for the crust. And then I just put a little bit of pink on the inside. And then of course, once you do one, you got to look at the others. So I think I'll just punch up all of the crusts on these donuts and then let's see where that leaves us. I think our donuts look pretty good. I think I'm done with the donuts, and now I'm just going to kind of clean up this right side of my palette. I'm going to add just a little bit of that synthetic iron oxide or some of the umber to it, just a little bit of that reddish brown, and I'm just kind of creating a wood tone here. I'm going in with my wide flat brush. You could use a round brush if you'd rather. And you want to keep your brush going kind of in the grain of the wood a little bit. I'm not doing it right here, but your final strokes should be in that same direction of the wood grain. So you want to get in real close where you can, just with the corner of the brush. And then you'll notice that I will go in and kind of clean it up with a little bit of black mixed in just to darken that hue that I've got. And then we're just going to add the most intense line right there on the shadow, put in some wood grain, and just kind of get these lines for the wood grain in, like so. You can spend as much or as little time on that wood grain as you like. I just wanted to keep it really pretty subtle because it's going to disappear off into the background. And what you'll probably notice is that the value of that wood grain is just about identical to the donuts. So that's why I'm coming in with a white Prismacolor color pencil. You can use any color pencil you like or a gel pen. And I'm just going along the edge of that back donut very lightly just to kind of create some powdered sugar dusting or a flour dusting. Anything like that will help to differentiate the donut from the background right there. And then for cohesiveness, I want to make sure and do that with the rest of the donuts, as well as add a little highlight on that chocolate donut. And now I'm going to go through with my kneaded eraser and just kind of rub out as much lines as I can. Honestly, you probably won't be able to get any erasing done if you've already painted over them. Typically when you watercolor over a pencil line, it's on there for good. So do keep that in mind. If you don't want any pencil lines to show, you'll need to be very careful about erasing them until they're very, very light. Personally, I don't mind the pencil lines, and in fact, I kind of like them. Even on bigger paintings, I really enjoy it because to me it tells a story of the process in its creation. Now when you remove the tape, you're going to want to use a heat tool regardless of which kind of tape you're using. Even though this is low tack washi tape, you always run the risk of it taking some of your paper away. So I always heat up that adhesive just to make sure that that doesn't happen. And now that I've got those done, I'm looking at it and I realize that upper right corner I kind of forgot, and here I have already taken the tape off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in with a smaller brush and I'm going to mix some gray with some ultramarine into that burnt sienna that I've got there on the palette. I really like using burnt sienna and ultramarine as a mix for darks because you can really use a wide spectrum of warm to cool. I'm going to go ahead and add in a little bit of the dioxazine purple because that is what we used in the box. Not a lot, but I am going to add a little because I just don't want this area to look like a little gray patch. I want it to kind of fill in with what we've already got going. So you notice I use a very thin wash, and I only went near the rim of the edge of the flap of the box there. And now I'm going in with just water and pulling that out. So the pigment is concentrated right there where the little wall meets the table and then along the flap of the box. And then you just blend that out with water and you have a beautiful subtle background, and that helps to make that flap of the box really pop forward. And with all of our paintings, I encourage you to give it a little title and definitely sign your name. I titled this one Break Time, and I'm signing my name and dating it with the month and the year. Always sign and date your paintings because you are creating a record of your progress as an artist. Even if you are an accomplished artist, you will create a memory and a record of what you were working on at that point in time in your artistic career. Now I'm using this leaf, this little plastic leaf, to separate the painting from the block, and I've got a little adhesive glitch over there on the right. But any kind of fairly sturdy plastic edged device like that that's kind of flat, if you've got a letter opener or a plastic picnic knife, a bone folder, anything like that will help you to release that painting from the block. And this block is so convenient. It measures 5 by 7. So you are all set, guys. You've got another painting completed. And I hope that you are starting to see some fun things with your art. I hope that you're starting to find your style as an artist. And if you're brand new to watercolor, don't forget to look in the description and check out the playlist of all of the beginning watercolor lessons I have. You don't have to do them in any particular order. You can do them in whatever order you like. The point is just have lots of fun. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I think I'm going to go have a donut. I hope everybody has a good day. We'll see you next time. Bye now.